Guatemala on November 1st. What day did I arrive in Guatemala? Luba.
I arrived in Guatemala on November 1st.
That is correct. Where did I arrive on November 1st? Natalia.
I arrived to Guatemala on November 1st.
I arrived in Guatemala on November 1st.
Yeah, to arrive in.
Okay, very well. So, where did I arrive on November 1st? Lydia, are you there? Where did I arrive on November 1st? Irina.
Guatemala on November 1st.
I arrived in Guatemala on November 1st. Correct. I arrived in Guatemala on the Day of the Dead, November 1st. I was curious about this holiday, so I went to the cemetery to see what was happening. Was I angry about this holiday, Tatiana?
No, I wasn't. I was curious about the holiday.
He was not. I wasn't angry about his holiday. I was curious. Was I sad about this holiday, Luba?
No, I wasn't sad about this holiday. I was curious.
That's correct. I was curious about this holiday. So who was curious about this holiday, Natalia?
I was curious about this holiday.
I was curious about this holiday. Well, yeah, I was. What was I curious about, Irina? I was curious about this holiday. You're correct. Which holiday was I curious about, Tatiana?
I was curious about the holidays of the Day of the Dead.
Day of the Dead. That's the name of the holiday.
The Day of the Dead.
I was curious about the Day of the Dead. This is what I was curious about. Now, was I curious about the Day of the Dead or was I curious about Christmas, Irina?
I was curious about the Day of the Dead.
Of course. I was curious about the Day of the Dead. So I went to the cemetery to see what was happening. So where did I go, Luba?
Went to the cemetery.
I went to the cemetery. I went to the cemetery. Did I go to the cemetery or did I go to the airport, Natalia?
I went to the cemetery.
That's easy, right? Of course, I went to the cemetery because I was curious about the holiday, the Day of the Dead, right?
The Day of the Dead.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So who went to the cemetery? Irina. I could not hear you. I'm very sorry. It was like the end of the. I went to the cemetery. Correct. All right. Okay. So, when did I go to the cemetery? Who remembers? Luba, do you remember when did I go there?
When I arrived in Guatemala, I went to the cemetery.
So when was that? When did I go to the cemetery? Okay. When was it then, Luba?
It was on November 1st.
November 1st, correct. November 1st, the Day of the Dead. I went to the cemetery on the Day of the Dead, November 1st. So why did I go to the cemetery? Tatiana.
I was to the cemetery because it was a holiday. It was the Day of the Dead. And I was curious about the holiday.
So why did I go to the cemetery? Well, to see what was happening, right? Remember? To see what was happening.
To see what was happening.
Right. I went to the cemetery to see what was happening. So who went to the cemetery to see what was happening? Irina. Who was that?
The cemetery.
Who? Who? I missed that.
I
I'm sorry.
went to the cemetery.
Yeah, me. That was me. That was me. I went to the cemetery to see what was happening. You're correct. So, where was the cemetery, Tatiana?
The cemetery was in Guatemala.
That is correct. What is the Day of the Dead, Natalia? What is the Day of the Dead?
The Day of the Dead is the holiday when people celebrate or their ancestors.
That's right. It's a holiday.
Mhm.
When is the Day of the Dead? Cuba.
November 1st.
Correct. November 1st. The Day of the Dead was and is November 1st. So I went to the cemetery on the Day of the Dead to see what was happening. What I found was quite interesting. Was it boring, Irina?
No, it wasn't.
Correct. It wasn't. It was not boring. Was it interesting, Tatiana?
Yes, it was quite interesting.
It was very interesting. The cemetery was interesting. Now, how did they feel about the cemetery, Natalia?
I'm sorry, I'm here.
How did
He
they
was very.
how did they
He was.
feel about the cemetery?
I was curious about the holiday,
That's
and
right. How did they feel?
okay. I wanted to see what was happening there.
Correct.
Yeah.
I felt it was interesting. Or I thought it was interesting. Right?
Yeah, right. I missed something. Maybe.
Right. And he was also curious,
Yeah.
the author. I felt curious. I wanted to see what was happening there. That's why I went. Now, was it boring or was it interesting? Luba.
Boring, it was quite interesting.
It was not boring. It was interesting. Of course it was interesting. What was interesting? Natalia.
It was interesting for him to see how they celebrate the holiday, and it was interesting for him to see what was happening there. Am I right?
I'd say the cemetery was interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, so what was interesting? The cemetery. The cemetery was very interesting. When was the cemetery interesting, Irina?
The cemetery was interesting.
On the Day of the Dead, right?